When I say penis, you say Parker. Penis?
Parker?
Penis?
Not in reference to Nicholas Parker who's been on the show?
No.
Just any old Parker?
Parker.
Okay, Parker.
Okay. My name is Matthew Krol.
And I'm pretty sure he's a war criminal or something. My name is Shahir Daud.
I'm at work. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Spider-Man Homecoming. Led in, of course, by that awesome parody from The Nerdist, That Spidey Life. This is big for me, Shahir. You know this.
I can tell right away by the decibel level of your voice.
And I can tell by your disdain that you did not just want to talk to me about this film. So we brought in easily the biggest gun we've ever brought in when it comes to reviewing film.
Movie gun?
A movie gun, yeah, sure, a cinematic canon, if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the host of such amazing YouTube shows as Really That Good, In Bob We Trust, and The Game Overthinker, Geek.com's resident film critic, and my favorite film reviewer on the planet, Bob Chipman. What is up, buddy?
Oh, hey, guys. Oh, wow, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm very excited to have you on, Bob. I mean, the thing that always gets me is every week, without fail, someone on my Facebook, on my Twitter, will post your review. So I'm really excited for us to say, hey, guess what? He's going to review it with us this week.
He slummed it with us.
He slummed it with us completely. Definitely lowering the stakes. Bob, how are you, dude?
I am good. I'm pretty good. It's been a busy day, but a decent day. Excited to talk more about the movie. And yeah, I'm in a good place right now.
Excellent. So, Bob, I've been following you since the Escapist days, which we do not have to talk about, but it's been for a while. And yeah, and just all your stuff, man. You've been, even when there's a very few times that I find myself disagreeing with your opinion, but you always find a way to like sway me more to your side than I think anyone else has ever done. And I always really appreciate it when people can do that. So thank you for doing what you do, first and foremost.
Oh, thank you, man. That means a lot.
Hey, Bob, I've got a quick question for you. I mean, a lot of the reviews I see right now coming from you that do get a lot of traction and end up on feeds are superhero movies. I'm curious, Bob, the film reviewer, pre-superhero movies, what kind of I mean, I've heard you talk about The Age of 17 quite a lot. I mean, what kind of films outside of that genre really get you going?
Well, I'll watch pretty much anything. The reason that there's I think feels like there's a focus on superhero movies right now is because that's what they're making.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, it's like, hey, you review a superhero movie every week, and I'm like, yeah, that's what's opening every week. That's what's opening wide, and that's ideally, especially when you're working for an outlet that you do not own yourself.
Gotcha.
And wants the highest traffic thing possible. If it comes out, if Spiderman comes out and anything else comes out, you're probably not reviewing anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you could, what would you, I mean, what outside of that genre do you wish you'd kind of taken a stab at that you might not have been able to because of the popularity of your show?
Well, I try to cover as much of the things as I can, but I actually have more in terms of just pure fun, in terms of, hey, that this is both fun to write and also work. I have more fun reviewing older films of all stripe than newer stuff. That's not to say that I think that, all newer stuff is bad or, nothing interesting happened after 1989, but you get to think on it more, you get to look at things. You can kind of get like the gods and generals view of history with it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And there's, you've seen where it landed in the spectrum of history and whether you can revise that or whether you agree with that or not. Right.
Yeah. I mean, if I had the kind of pull that's some, and I think hopefully I can get to that at some point. It's been an up and down. That, there are some YouTube reviewers, quote unquote, that pretty much anything they put up is going to get 1 million hits no matter what.
Right.
And they can, and the people that can do that, 90% of them have worked their asses off to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
To a degree, and have built it largely on their own without having to have been part of a corporation or an outlet, like I have. So more power to them, just enormous amounts of respect. If I had that kind of platform, I might still review new movies just because I like going to movies. I see them all the time. It's good to have, to keep current with things. But, the things as a film content maker that bring me the most personal joy is like in October when I do Schlocktober, which started out on the Escapist site and now is part of In Bob We Trust. Because that's just, 5 to 10 minute essays about, bizarre old stuff that no one's heard of. And I'm never happier doing that part of my work than I am when I put out something like that or something from Good Enough Movies or Really That Good. And people tell me, hey, I'd never heard of that before. This is nuts. I'm so glad you showed that to me. That's as close as I get to feeling like this is more than like a job. Like this is, I did some legitimate good for someone.
Well, yeah. And also I kind of want to touch on Really That Good, briefly, because when you first started doing that, and for listeners, who don't know what that is, it's basically your take. You look back and it's like almost like half-hour-ish deep dive into films, and you talk about like if like they are still really that good, but you do it in such a positive way. I mean, I know we're guilty, me more than Shahir, of when we don't like something, it's very easy to like attack it, but we always do fall back to, we understand filmmaking is hard, and we understand most people don't go out to make a bad movie, so like it does eventually start feeling bad when it's just bile over and over and over again. What I really love about Really That Good is it not only is it a deep dive, but it's really a positive take on the deep dive, and I've really appreciated that as well.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that's the pure labor of love of what I do, because it takes much too long, and YouTube's algorithms and such are much too arcane for that to ever be something that's like purely profitable. Yeah. But it's the thing that I'm proudest of that I've put out there in the criticism sense of, it's a thing I've always worried about in this job, in this genre of writing, video making, whatever, is that it's both easy and often seems more interesting to look at why something doesn't work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And often things that are actually, good and that everyone kind of agrees are good, people stop talking about why. Mm-hmm. Right. And it leads to things like being assumed, like, oh, this is like, I remember when I was a kid, everyone worshipped Steven Spielberg. Right. Yeah. He was, and now, pretty much still do, but like film talk people, just said, oh my God, Steven Spielberg, he's the god of living directors. He's amazing. When I'm a teenager and when I'm a 20-something in taking film classes in college, it turns into, oh, Steven Spielberg, God, it's so mainstream. All he does is make movies that everyone likes. Yeah. That's so easy.
There's an interesting Dawson's Creek moment, which
Dawson's Creek?
Dawson's Creek, yeah. Dawson's Creek moment, which features exactly that. And I think we're going to talk about Steven Spielberg quite a lot in our next week review when we review Bong Joon-ho's Okja, which is just coming up on Netflix as well. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It is a classic sort of film snobbery thing to disrespect the work of populists, and take that and make it seem like it's assumed that populists are automatically bad if you're a film critic because you're diving deep. I wonder, just before we move on into Spider-Man, if there's one film that you could either champion, something that either got you excited about filmmaking and being a film reviewer, or one film that's out right now that you kind of like, maybe just not be getting as much love and you wish you could just kind of direct people towards. Is there anything like that you could kind of just mention to us before we dive straight into the biggest movie on the planet?
Right now, I don't know if it's still under embargo, but if hypothetically there was a film coming out that was about gorillas of some sort,
sure, of course,
perhaps in some kind of conflict, I would say is even better than I was expecting.
I'm sure we're going to be talking about some gorillas soon, and I'm pretty sure Gorilla's going to get a lot of loves.
Yeah, definitely something I was very fond of. I'm trying to think if there was any other.
Even when you were, a young film student or a young, aspiring filmmaker, something that really, E.T., anything that just got you going.
Well, I wish I had a more interesting answer, that wasn't like a typical nerd kind of thing, but it was more than anything else the early work from Sam Raimi and Peter Jackson that really nudged me in.
Yep.
Oh, so bad. I'm from New Zealand, by the way. So bad taste
awesome.
is kind of, bad taste, brain dead, Meet the Feebles are part of the lexicon of what I grew up with.
Oh yeah, and they're amazing films, and also what, and I heaven only knows if this is still the case in the digital age, but what was so striking about those was not only are, here's two guys that are sort of like making my own kind of sensibility things, is even though they're huge, elaborate, and incredibly skilled filmmakers, they're working on these shoestring budgets, and you can see the seams and the masks, and you can see how the cheesy special effects were done, and it made me want to go out and say, wait a minute, that looks about at the level of something I can manage. I think I could. It gets you so psyched up to look at like Peter Jackson playing 5 roles in Bad Taste.
In Bad Taste, yeah. And you know what's remarkable though is I think in that sort of looking at something in its historical context is watching something like Bad Taste or Evil Dead and realizing that there's no money in those films, but watching and going, I can see the filmmaker that would make Lord of the Rings in that movie. Because there's an escalation of stakes and spectacle, which directly relates to exactly what he does in those later films, which I think is really, like as you say, as a young filmmaker, is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's just, and actually I did just think of a more recent movie that I think should be on everyone's must-see list. If you didn't see Colossal yet, see it.
I loved Colossal. Yep. It's going to end up on my top 10 list, I'm pretty sure.
It was such a nice sort of surprise for me coming out of the gate, and we did Colossal.
Yes, we did.
And that was so much fun, and if you went a lot of places other than I didn't expect it to go.
Yeah. And if you want to hear our Colossal review or check out anything else we've done, you can go back and go onto our website, onlymoviepodcast.com, or you can hit us up for a request or any other kind of review. Tell us the movies that got you passionate about movie making, or wanting to find out more about movies by emailing us at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod.
That was a smooth transition, by the way. Just wanted to call out and break the smoothness you did. And that was a very nice, that was a colossal transition, Shahir.
And that was not.
Yeah, there we go. Zing! All right, enough of this nonsense.
But enough of the small indies that got us there. Although I think we're actually going to use that phrase a lot in reference to Spider-Man Homecoming.
Possibly?
I think we are.
You are. So you've just put the cart before the horse. Okay, so everyone who's listened to this show before knows my history with Spider-Man. I love.
Actually, I don't think they do know your history of Spider-Man. I think they know your history with Marvel movies. But we have not reviewed, even though there's been a reboot and a sequel. This is the first Spider-Man movie that we've done, and I don't think we've. Obviously, we would have talked about Spider-Man in Civil War.
Sure.
But let me know about Matt, Krol, and Spider-Man. I think there's a fun John Gabris story in relation to this.
Oh,
as well.
God, yeah. Okay, so for Bob Shahir and everyone else, I mean, Spider-Man has been the character that I have, the superhero, I should say, that I've related to the most as I don't know, as nerdy teenage kids tend to. Like, that's nothing special about that really whatsoever, or unique, I should say. But I've also been drawn to him because even though he's kind of one of the weirdest, he also feels kind of the most real, because you see more of his real life than most major superheroes, and it's a real life that is. You can relate to it because it's similar to you. It's not Batman who's just super rich, or like Clark Kent who's just pretending to be a doof. Like it feels, that part feels more grounded in the balance and always feeling like an outcast no matter what you do. So, and that has spilled over into multiple things. Bob, I may or may not own 3 Spidey suits. I don't know if they could be in the closet directly to my right. But yeah, I've just, and obviously the Raimi films 1 and 2 are just, I love them so much. And 3, Bob, everyone who's listening right now, Bob did an amazing video called, I believe it's called "You're Wrong About Spider-Man 3." Is that what it was?
That's the title.
Yeah.
That's the title.
Holy crap. I literally, anytime someone purely shits on Spider-Man 3, I sit them down and I put my laptop and I hit play, and they're like, oh my God.
Matt carries around his laptop specifically for that
just
purpose.
For this moment.
Yeah.
I know I could play it on my phone, but that's just too easy. So, I mean, yeah, I'm a huge Spidey fan. And my issue with this, guys, was, so obviously I liked what happened in Civil War. But I'm based on the whole, we could talk about this a little bit, but the whole Marvel and Sony deal and, just how Sony is Sony. Sometimes with these franchise movies that they just have to pump out to pull off a checkbox. It got me worried enough about this, even though there was a collaboration. So I kept my expectations of this film incredibly low. I wasn't, even the day I was going to see it, I wasn't hyped like almost every other Spider-Man movie, even though I knew the Amazings weren't going to be good. I was always like, oh, there's a thread, there's a hope of a chance. And this one I was just like, nope, I'm going to go in level headed. And I feel like I did that for the most part, all the spoily trailers notwithstanding, but, yeah, I mean, that's basically, again, it's not an interesting story. It's just sort of the story that I have. I could boil that down a lot faster. I like Spider-Man. Bob, what about you? What's your history with the character or the films or anything web-slinger related?
Geez. Well, I can't remember exactly why I decided I liked Spider-Man as a small child. I just sort of remember that I did.
Right.
Given, the age thing, I probably didn't first come to it in comics, especially since I don't think anyone really I don't think anyone born after about 1985 or so really comes to their favorite superhero characters from comics. You usually find it somewhere else and then slide back in. That seems to be my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always loved Spider-Man as a kid, always sort of identified with it, which is sort of the point of this character. I remember I was working in a Blockbuster video store. You're shocked, I'm sure. That,
we were all there.
with friends when the first Spider-Man movie was getting made. And, back then you did not get the steady drip of free information about films coming out. So we knew that this was in production. It had failed a bunch of times. No one knew who was going to direct it. And I distinctly remember, leaving work one night, having spent the night discussing with friends because everyone was sure it was either going to be David Fincher or Chris Columbus were the two directors in the running to direct Spider-Man.
Okay.
This was after the James Cameron script that kind of floated around the internet for a while.
Oh, years. This was after that had become a distant memory that was never going to happen.
Right.
Gotcha.
So that went down, and on my way in. So I go home, go to bed, wake up the next morning to check AICN, before going in, as did, because we all did. We're going to talk about at work.
Because we all went to AICN is more than we should have.
Yeah, as it turned out. Yeah. This is for the younger folks listening. There was no such thing as a smartphone, and you generally were not logging onto the internet at work to know about things.
Yeah.
So you didn't know this stuff. And this sort of thing was not reported on TV. Entertainment Tonight was not going to break into their coverage of whatever Mario Lopez was doing to tell you who was directing the friggin' Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
That was not a thing that was going to happen.
And I'm not used to it when I'm walking by a TV that E! News is on and they're like, Infinity War. And I'm like, well, how is this on there?
Yeah.
So even in the days when Spider-Man 1 was just coming out, I think Sam Raimi wasn't a household name to the point where I think film fans were excited at the idea of Sam Raimi, this guy who'd been doing sort of Evil Dead, these horror movies, Darkman, that kind of thing, was going to do a big, tentpole release. And I think that even the idea of big superhero tentpoles wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy, that was really the point at which Sam Raimi became the Sam Raimi that we know today, even though he's been around for a while. You're also a big comic book reader as well, I'm guessing, having looked at some of your videos. What's is there a particular Spider-Man story that really grabbed you, or anything in the comic books that worked that well for you as well?
My favorite Spider-Man stories were generally published before I was born.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm very fond of pretty much everything on from when John Romita took over the book as main artist all the way up through the early 1980s. Pretty much right around the time Todd McFarlane starts regularly drawing, and then once Venom has come back more than once is the point where I kind of go, okay, all right, I'm sort of out, I'm no longer that interested in this.
Yeah.
But that whole run is just probably my favorite comic stuff, certainly from Marvel ever. that was huge. So that was big. Once I eventually was able to, reread it in trades and back issues and whatnot, I was like, yeah, this is as good as it should be.
Okay. I'll keep mine fairly short, which is that Spider-Man for me is not a character I've been that interested in, growing up. Obviously, for me, when I read The Dark Knight Returns, that transformed what I understood about Batman. So Batman became the zenith point for what I thought and felt the superhero genre could turn towards. So I was always a Batman fan. I really enjoyed the first Spider-Man movie in the theater. I thought it was like a rollicking good time. It was the first time I kind of felt like, hey, this is just, pure cinematic fun. I wasn't, and then I think, for me, my if you listen to any of our back episodes, my lack of interest in superhero films because of their sort of adherence to conventionality I would actually really pinpoint it to being around Spider-Man 2, which I know is like, a much beloved film, but for me, that was the point at which I found the emotional undertones of what Raimi was trying to do with Spider-Man to be a little uninteresting. It seemed to work and people loved it, but I personally started finding it a little, fairly uninteresting. I'm maybe I'm a little bit older than you guys. I still remember watching the Spider-Man TV show back in the day with the actual theme song. Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure I tried to like throw myself off a couple of fences or something like that, pretending to be Spider-Man when I was a little kid.
You threw yourself off fences?
Pretty sure
you didn't at least jump.
Pretty sure I thought I could shoot webbing out of my hands.
Okay, well you have to build the web shooters first.
Yeah.
This is before organic webbing.
I have Spider-Man's not a character that I've kind of been curiously fascinated by. I guess the main thing that I'm really curious about now is that the fact that Iron Man is a bigger draw card to fans than Spider-Man is, and you can even see it in the marketing of Spider-Man Homecoming. It feels like Spider-Man has become a secondary character, even though he was the poster child for the Marvel comic books. So I guess I'm really curious about that. But again, as I say, Spider-Man is something I'm kind of mildly interested in, but not ever devoutly in love with.
Fair, except for all the Spider-Man 2 stuff. I think that's all fair. So this movie in particular, guys, again, we mentioned it briefly, this Sony and Marvel sort of team up, which seemed very hopeful to me at first. And then with the announcements of the Spidey cinematic universe that will kind of, I guess, break away from the Marvel cinematic universe, even though he's going to be in Infinity War. And then they're doing obviously the Venom movie and is there a Black Cat and Silver Sable? Is that the thing?
They say it's a thing. They've signed a director. They've signed a pretty good director. Gina Prince Blythewood is on that, which is, I think it's a terrible idea, but good for her.
Yeah. Okay. What stuff that she's done? Is she? I'm trying to think because the name sounds familiar. I'm just not.
Secret Life of Bees.
Oh, okay.
Gina Prince Blythewood. She's best known for Disappearing Acts and Love and Basketball. Both came out in 2000. Probably the two best known ones, and Secret Life of Bees and Beyond the Lights in 2004. And she's also done a lot of television.
Yeah, I've heard very good things about Beyond the Lights.
Yeah, she's and she's also directing the Cloak and Dagger pilot for Marvel.
Oh,
for the TV.
I thought that looked interesting. What did you see the trailer for that?
Yes, I did.
What did you think about that?
I think it looks interesting. I think. Cloak and Dagger always felt, it's a pretty good characters in the comics, but always felt like, as a concept, something that was waiting for someone to come around and say, oh, hell, this should be a TV show.
Yeah.
So it's taken long enough, but hey, it looks good. It's on, it's on whatever ABC Family is called now.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, they rebranded that, didn't they?
Fusion, Freeform.
Freeform. Yep. Freeform. Yeah. And if it's so funny because if you look at something like the Cloak and Dagger trailer versus something like I don't know, the Inhumans trailer, one was paid for by IMAX and doesn't look great yet. and the other one just sort of came out of nowhere with these sort of minor characters too that are just I don't know. I'm so looking forward to that in direct juxtaposition of the Inhuman stuff. But so sorry. So yeah. So the deal with Sony and Marvel is kind of unprecedented in like big sort of franchisee history, right? Like borrowing a character and like you get money off your movies and we get money off our movies, but like we get to use Tony Stark and you get to use Spider-Man. Like that just seems so strange. And then I wonder, especially watching this film, Spider-Man Homecoming, like the parts that I liked and the parts that I didn't like, I always find myself like, who am I blaming for this? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's Sony when I don't like it, but maybe it's a Marvel thing. I don't know. My fanboy could be showing. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, I was the thing, part of my homework this week was on Hulu there was a documentary playing Doom: The Untold Story of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, which I caught and watched, and that's a really interesting. It's not a great film, but it's an interesting look at the way in which the rights for a property can become hotly contested and can basically allow a film like Roger Corman's Fantastic Four to be made in an attempt to kind of seal the rights. And I think, like the one thing about it that we have to remember is Sony bought the rights to Spider-Man when Marvel was not a studio. And when Marvel's, biggest success story up until that point had been things like the schlocky Spider-Man TV show or the Incredible Hulk TV show. So these weren't like, high watermarks for translation of their material into a cinematic world. So the selling off of the rights between Marvel and Sony, I guess, and Bob, you can probably speak to this more because I didn't even watch the second Amazing Spider-Man movie at this point. It felt like it's impossible for Sony to try and continue the facade of owning Spider-Man and keeping Spider-Man from Avengers when it seemed that he was such a bitter fit for what Marvel was doing with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I wonder if you guys, being passionate fans about Spider-Man, didn't see it as a somewhat kind of admittance of defeat on Sony's part, and maybe even a cynical, like having the character redrawn this third time so quickly after, it had basically been redone again for a second time, felt somewhat, like it seems to me the machinations of a studio were on display for us. And I wonder, as you guys as fans, whether there was something kind of mildly cynical about that or, like made it feel slightly cynical.
I don't think I need to have been a fan to see this as completely cynical.
Right.
like this is as naked a glimpse as the mass audience, both of press and, like the press never gets to see it this clearly. The audience certainly doesn't, of seeing how the sausage gets made on these things. Right. Of like this is, and a lot of it is very unfortunate. Like the ugly component to this is I don't know how much of this ever happens without the Sony hack.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And now that we, unfortunately, like at the time that was already kind of ugly. It's like, oh, hey, I don't love, these hacker brats, breaking into Sony's email and, effing up everyone's jobs just because. And now those same guys have kind of, had their fun with my country's elections.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that happened. So so what was already an ugly side to this story is now a really ugly side to this story because you've got all of that business involved. But, the thing of it is, even when the Amazing movies were coming out, we now know, and it was, moderately known at the time, that Marvel and Sony were talking to each other and past each other, trying to work out some way to cross-promote these things. And the issue with it is that Sony needs Marvel a lot more than Marvel needs Sony.
Yeah.
Not in terms of like making a good film. I think if Sony if Sony was not run by fairly incompetent producers,
yeah,
which they are, and with Tom Rothman there now continue to be.
Yeah.
This is me pretty much ceding any chance I'm ever going to get to actually work in this town. But Sony has been run by morons for a long time, and they're just run by a different class of morons now, just trying to build the company's stock up so it can eventually get sold to this or that Chinese conglomerate. So whatever.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
You could have knocked me over with a feather when they said, okay, we got rid of that regime at Sony that everything was going wrong for. Now meet former head of Fox Studios, Tom Rothman, one of the most despised figures in the entire film industry in the United States, coming in to get the save at Sony.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens.
Well, I mean, if you look at Sony's biggest hit to date is Spider-Man. Their second biggest hit to date is Spider-Man 2. Their fourth biggest hit to date is Spider-Man 3. So you can understand, and I'm sure from Sony's point of view, seeing what Marvel had become, like you said yourself, Marvel didn't need Sony as much as Sony needed, the Marvel property. But that was not the case, in 2002, when Spider-Man came out. That just, it's simply, the thought that Iron Man was going to be a huge successful film that kicked off this entire cinematic universe was but a mere glint in the eye of Marvel's executives at that point, Kevin Feige. So it's, I'm curious, I guess I find it interesting, and I see a lot of the potential cynicism for the way we would watch Spider-Man Homecoming at play right from the get-go. Like, this is a film where it feels like this character, who again was the most successful superhero prior to Iron Man, it feels like this character has somewhat fallen from grace and is now kind of a minor character that needs to be propped up by Iron Man, by Tony Stark in the Spider-Man in his own universe, and the audience needs gentle reminders of, hey, he was in Avengers Infinity War, and he's going to be in Infinity War. He's a character that we all kind of love. Get it? Look, here he is. I mean, I'm curious, you guys as fans, how you responded to that.
I mean, I think, to be honest, the Amazing films, while you could pick one or two sort of things that are maybe okay throughout them, I think one of the major damages that they did was to the character of Peter Parker. Like, in my opinion, they made him not only not Peter Parker, but just not likable. He was kind of a dick. He literally steals a minority's internship to get into Oscorp. He does these small, tiny, weird, dumb things that are just like, this is not a good person, and he's more of a dick than he is. I don't know. It's kind of sullied, and I feel like if you look at Tobey Maguire or Raimi's Spider-Man versus the Amazing Spider-Man, not that I think that Andrew Garfield would have made a particularly bad Spider-Man had he been directed differently. Mm-hmm. I just think that with Raimi's films, you get a character that you can really buy into the weird, amazing shit that Spider-Man does, because behind it all is the character of Peter Parker being played very well, who is a shy, invisible nobody who has a heart of gold. And in the Amazing films, it's like he's the same person inside and outside of the suit. Yeah. And it sullied it for me. Mm. And now I was psyched to sort of see something at least closer to Raimi's Spider-Man. I don't know, Bob, what do you think about that?
Well, when it comes to the Amazing movies, I can't put too much of it on Andrew Garfield. I really can't put too much of it on Mark Webb. They have awful screenplays, written by not terribly good writers. Once again, goodbye to working in the industry. But,
listen, I'm definitely sure all of Sony's people are listening.
Everyone's listening.
Yeah. Orsi and Kurtzman are just not good at what they do, and they're really not good at what they keep getting hired to do, which is build these universe things. And the thing of it is, you look at the Amazing Spider-Man movies, if you follow the business of filmmaking for a while, you start to be able to see the difference between a movie where the producers, in terms of the executives of the company who want to control a whole bunch of other business stuff through this movie, and are in charge, and where a director is in charge. And, like for better or for worse, in, say, the Transformers movies, not good films, don't like them at all, but Michael Bay is in charge of those movies.
Right.
Because if he wasn't, they wouldn't be 3 hours long and go off on all these bizarre tangents that are just sort of specific to various obsessions of Michael Bay and his writers.
Romeo and Juliet law.
Also, Robert, was it Kurtzman and Orsi have been involved in the Transformers universe.
In the second one, yeah. The worst one.
Yeah.
That's how bad they are. They wrote the worst Transformers movie.
But they are producers extraordinaire who continue. I mean, their work is extended into the Mummy universe this past year.
Oh God, that's right.
But also Star Trek and Transformers. They're if not prolific.
Oh,
I am willing and look, I as a working writer, I never want to shit too much on another working writer. So, there is such a thing in Hollywood of being really, really good in the room, and with the kind of things they do, it's very clear that they must be spectacular in the room in terms of pitching, because there's good at pitching and there's also good at being able to, hear whatever stupid note that the executive is sending you and say like, he needs to skateboard in this movie. You need to get him on like literally, if you want an example of why these guys must be effing amazing at what they do, go back and watch the Poochie episode of The Simpsons. And watch when that poor guy is having to draw a character based on the random, vague insistencies of all of these guys, and listens to every one of them, incorporates it in, and eventually gets a thumbs up from them. That is the working experience of Hollywood's screenwriters on these things. And if you can do that, you can work. If you can hear them say, we think Peter Parker should have a skateboard scene in there. Can you get that in? Can you make him more of like a chosen one? Can we get a Destiny sort of thing happening? Because everybody likes Destiny in the Matrix. If you can say yes to that and make that executive feel like his note has been listened to and is in the script, you will work.
Yeah. To be fair,
so kudos to them.
Yeah.
To be fair, The Amazing Spider-Man was written by by a person who wrote one of my favorite screenplays, James Vanderbilt, who wrote Zodiac. To be fair, Orsi and Kurtzman kind of came on in the second half, and I think there's something true to what you're saying in terms of the thing that's true to me about that is even if you've critically failed, like Orsi and Kurtzman have known to have done, especially with Transformers 2, for an executive, they would much rather trust someone who has, delivered on a franchise before than try someone new, especially franchises like Transformers and Star Trek that make money. These movies are colossal money makers. And so, I think, and it really does get into that question that we've been having, especially in relation to the firing of Phil Lord and Chris Miller on the Star Wars franchise movies, the Han Solo movie, as to what a director is required to do on a movie like this. Especially, I think, especially around Patty Jenkins in Wonder Woman, there was this sort of question of like, do we trust a director to do this? And I think the firing of Phil Lord and Chris Miller, if you want to talk about the sausage being, seeing how the sausage is made, exposes the notion that directors, especially on these big tentpole films, and especially filmmakers coming in like John Watts for Spider-Man Homecoming, aren't necessarily there because of their previous work. They're there because they have known to deliver or could potentially deliver and are at a stage in their career where they may be willing to take those kinds of notes, as you just mentioned before. And I think there's something really interesting about what John Watts delivers on Spider-Man Homecoming in relation to that conversation.
Well, should we spent about a half hour, if not more, talking about the histories and the back and forth machinations.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into the Homecoming.
I feel like I should go first because I want you guys to have the lion's share conversation about this movie.
Okay.
And
this is terrifying, Bob. When he sets stuff up like this, it's normally a trap. So just be ready for anything.
I want to say a couple of things. Spider-Man Homecoming for me is a good example of something that I often feel like doesn't work in these larger Marvel, larger cinematic universe movies, which is that it's reliant entirely upon your knowledge and understanding of previous iterations of the character in order to engage with and enjoy this particular film. And I find that I think that can be useful, but I find more often than not that does not actually advance what the film is potentially able to do as much as it kind of just, gives us a framework to understand it. And so an example of where I think that really works well is Logan, which takes our knowledge and understanding of who Logan is and transforms it in a way. It's, kind of similar to what Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns did. So that's something I'm always kind of like, I feel often on the back foot with these kinds of movies when it's so overly reliant on reminding us that it is part of a bigger franchise and it is part of a bigger universe, and that is where we should draw our pleasure from. On the other side of it is, this is a genuinely charming and engaging and fun film. I actually did have a very good time at this movie. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. One of the, and I'll break it into minutia just to explain my point a little bit, which is that the reason why I think part of us were all dazzled by the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man was that Raimi managed to bring to life the visceral thrill of being Spider-Man. And it was something that, we'd kind of all thought about and we hadn't really, we'd all imagined, but Raimi actually like brought it to life. So we saw Spider-Man swinging from Manhattan's buildings and it was a roller coaster rush. The interesting thing about Homecoming never tries to do that. It never, and I think that was something true of The Amazing Spider-Man as well. I think Homecoming really just skips over that attempt to translate the visceral pleasure of being Spider-Man to screen. Instead, it has smaller moments like that, but instead, what I'm kind of really impressed by is John Watts as a director. He's also a credited screenwriter on this film, of just pushing the story forward. He really doesn't linger on any big visual theatrical moment. Instead, he just kind of just rams the story forward and he just keeps it going and keeps turning it up. And I think, as much as my initial hesitations about the way in which we should watch a movie like this because of its place within, a 22 movie arc at this point. And I think we've talked about this in some of our previous reviews. It feels to me a little bit like we're getting into what television was back in the 90s kind of thing with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is that they're kind of, every movie feels like a monster of the week and it's just kind of treading water. I'm not passionately engaged with the overall arc. That said, I think this is a very good episode of the Spider-Man story. I think this is a very, very good episode of a Marvel TV
this is
show
during peak week.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a good bottle episode. It's
or sweeps week.
It's inconsequential. It's moderately unambitious, but it succeeds on its own terms, and that's what I like about it. Oddly, it feels to me to be it feels like an indie Marvel movie. If those two words thrown together kind of make sense. In that, it feels like, imagine if there was a superhero movie at Sundance this year, and this would be that movie. It's small, it's charming. It's and as pejorative as the term has become reflective upon Sundance Award winners recently, it's somewhat inconsequential, but it works on its own terms.
If that is true, then that would explain why you kind of liked it.
I didn't dislike my time at the movie.
Fair.
It's
Fair.
on par with Star Trek Beyond and Guardians of the Galaxy for me, as in they're really good, entertaining episodes.
Okay, Bob, you wanna take your first thoughts?
I agree with that summation of it. I think if it was a Sundance movie, it would be one that probably didn't make it to theaters.
Exactly. A film like The Sessions, which won a lot of awards, but nobody saw.
Yeah, I think it would have won awards either. I think it would have been a Sundance movie that people kind of said, "Oh, hey, that's charming,"
Yeah.
And you know, which is, you know, by the way, fine. You know, every once in a while, one of those turns out to be a big deal. I'm gonna probably date myself a little bit, which is bizarre that this would be considered dated, but it really sort of feels like like everyone said the reference point to this was like, oh, it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off because they showed it on TV at one point and they've done that really cynical trailer that, you know, just makes it look like Ferris Bueller's Day Off because they play the Runnin' Home song.
Yeah.
And, but like the reference point to this to me honestly feels a little bit closer to Napoleon Dynamite.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair.
I can see that.
Although Napoleon Dynamite is a major head.
Yeah, well, it was, but it was also a really tiny movie that came out of nowhere because the Nickelodeon crowd got onto it and said, oh, hey, this is us.
Yeah, okay. I can see that.
Yeah, I thought, you know, I think the movie's fine. I think it's just it's a good enough, mostly disposable teenage movie that happens to also be about Spider-Man. And I don't see that as an inherently negative thing. I see the fact that, you know, they didn't make a particularly interesting movie or tell a particularly interesting story out of it to be a negative thing. I think if you've got something that, you know, whatever form you release it in, you're going to make $1 billion no matter what, you know, you should possibly feel just a little bit obligated to, you know, do something, you know, remotely interesting with it. These movies tend to be either really good, really interesting, or really bad. And to have one come out that's just a decent, not spectacular 2.5-star movie is almost kind of weird. You know, where it's not a movie that, like, is going to elevate the Marvel thing at all. It doesn't do a single thing to change the face of the Marvel universe or really add anything to it, but it also doesn't, like, it's not like when Batman v Superman comes out and it's like, oh my god, is this whole project already over?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it doesn't do that either. It's just, it's an okay movie. It is very much an episodic thing. Like, okay, here's the most recent Marvel thing. It's out. You enjoyed it for, you know, 2 hours or however long it is. And, now move on and watch some other movie. And I'm fine with that, even if I wish it was a better movie.
So I agree with both of you. However, I guess this is my difference. So we talk a lot about on here, sort of how a movie sort of makes you emotionally react. Now, my emotional reactions to this film, I feel, and it's weird to even be able to do this with a Spider-Man movie because I should just kind of want to like it blindly, because I'm me. But I can definitely separate sort of what I feel is like the good parts of it, the bad parts of it, what works, what doesn't. You are both correct. It is just an okay movie. But the things that it does well in that stew of okayness are the exact things that speak to me as a film viewer, as a content creator, and as my I guess inner child, so to speak, or who I was when I was like 15. And what I found way more interesting than, like, because the action stuff was just sort of action stuff and it was neat, like, that's cool. Shahir, you mentioned they don't like ever do total like full on action porn to it, so it's just like yep, and they move through it and whatever. The high school stuff, the stuff with his friends, the moment honestly that was the most heartbreaking for me in this film, we'll just get into spoilers because we've been talking for so long and this isn't even a major one, is when they're in Washington DC at the field trip and Liz Allen runs into him and they're all going to the pool. Like, they snuck out of their rooms and they're going to the pool late night on this school field trip, which I've done a bunch of times, and I've also felt left out of doing a bunch of times, and Peter can't join because he has to go be Spider-Man. And it's just like, it's those moments, and Ned, his best friend in the movie, Ned, really sort of seals all this sort of feeling home for me. That's the stuff that I really gravitated towards. Then you put that through a Spider-Man lens for me, and I'm not kidding when I said I was literally caught myself just consistently smiling. And then I get into the question of, okay, if I'm really loving the experience of watching this, but I know critically that it's just a film, I don't know where I should fall on this. I feel like I'm gloating a little, not gloating, making a sort of a more glowing review than I should. I I think its use of music feels sort of super forced, and like all superhero movies are using popular, like poppy music. So now we're going to cram a bunch of songs in here randomly.
Oddly, we're going to cram in the Rolling Stones right at the beginning.
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
I feel like I think there's something you called out, Bob, in your review, the heavy lifting scene. Where, due to no fault of his own, I guess, Vulture knocks a whole building on Peter Parker, and we get that classic comic book Spidey has to believe in himself to lift the giant thing off him, because that's a trope throughout a bunch of times. But as you said, Bob, in your review, which everyone should go check that out, it's basically like the reason that works in other Spidey stories is because there was a moment where he didn't believe it, like really didn't believe in himself. And this movie doesn't have that. Yeah. Like he just looks at the mask. And I do remember kind of groaning when he like looks down at the mask and sees his reflection. I was just like, okay. So there's moments that do break it. But again, I have to say, the right place, right time, right viewer. And this is a movie where if I know your tastes and if they align with mine in sort of a Spidey way, in a Spidey sense sort of way, I would, suggest it to someone unabashedly. However, I have a lot of friends that do love the Marvel movies, some of the Marvel movies, not all of them, that I'd be like, it's all right. Like, it's so strange to say that the Marvel Sony team up of Spider-Man Homecoming is a personal experience for me. Because it is just total franchising. But yeah, I really overall loved it a lot, and I'm looking forward to subsequent viewings. I loved all that little stuff, and the super nerdy stuff too. The subtle Easter egg stuff with what's his Childish Gambino? Why can't the guy who's
Donald
playing
Glover.
Yeah, Donald Glover, who's playing the Proto Prowler? Yeah. Basically mentioning he has a nephew being Miles Morales.
Yeah.
The Mac Gargan stuff was a little heavy-handed. I liked it when he first showed up, but then it was a little bit too much for me.
Yeah.
And then the MJ reveal sort of thing was neat, even though everyone already knew she was basically MJ anyway.
Yeah, I can't wait for the post-mortem on that, because it feels like they chickened out of something and then tried to chicken back in.
Yep, exactly.
It's weird. I feel like they placed her in somewhere on the spectrum all of a sudden. Like MJ is somewhere. There's something kind of misaligned with her, and I'm wondering where that's going to go.
Well, I think they just wanted to go complete opposite of what MJ is normally. And first of all, MJ didn't go to high school with Peter.
Right.
In the comics, if I remember it correctly, that she was a friend of Gwen Stacy later once they were in college, I think. I don't know. But so MJ in high school, even though it worked very well in the Raimi movies because she was the only sort of one, but you have Liz Allen as the love interest in this one, which is great. Let's talk about this. How did you guys feel about, first of all, Michael Keaton? I think I never even realized anyone could make the Vulture good. The Vulture is just a character that like totally works in like the 60s and 70s, but like now you're like old man in a bird suit. Which, I mean, Michael Keaton's been playing a version of that role his entire life. Yeah. But how did you guys feel about the turn? And this was a legitimate actual twist for me that a very spoiler heavy trailer release schedule did not spoil, thankfully. The scene where Peter's picking Liz up for prom and the door opens and it's the Vulture's there, and at first I thought it was the classic moment of, oh, the villain's figured it out and he stopped by and now he's got the family hostage, but it turns out
he's actually
Liz's dad.
Yeah.
I was like in weird nerd shock for a little bit. And I don't know. I loved that moment. How did you guys feel?
I like it as a reveal because like it is the only thing in the movie that I couldn't see coming from a mile away.
Yes.
And it is so because it's a gigantic flaming cheat. That he would not that he would have gone to school with this person for many, many years. And not only not know, given the fact that we are informed early on through visual exposition that Peter and Ned have been quietly stalking this girl for enough time, because we have this whole scene of them sitting in the lunchroom and remarking to each other on whether or not she's worn different clothes that day, which is because they're small and harmless is sort of adorable. And, if they were literally 2 years older in portrayal, would be just sort of
creepy,
like worse than Andrew Garfield was on the creepy scale in this thing. But so they know all of this about her. She's with them. She's friends with them. They're on this team. Not only has Peter never met her parents, he did not see a single photograph of the Vulture when he's in the Vulture's house at some other point in the movie. And for whatever reason, Liz Allen, despite the fact that her mother is credited in the business for this as Allen Toombs, Liz, for whatever reason, does not use her apparently on good terms stepfather's hyphenated name, so that Peter does not get to see that other last name in school and make this connection.
Right.
So, I'm not someone who tends to complain about plot holes, like it's a minor thing, but if you think about it, there's no excuse for him not to know this.
I think, within the world of the film and the world of Peter's concerns, I feel like it's plausible that he may never have even put the two things together. So that it didn't bug me that much. But it sounds like, again, I think, Matt, what you're saying is that it works as a moment. And for me personally, I think the thing here is that it comes down to how efficiently a job John Watts, the director, does at pushing the story forward so that when that moment happens, it genuinely feels like a moment. And it's a smaller moment, and it's not hinged upon sort of a big explosion or anything like that. It's hinged upon our understanding of what we know of this character. I may have kind of been, it may have sounded like I was giving this a backhanded compliment to begin with. I genuinely enjoyed this, and I was genuinely taken by just thinking about this film from the point of view of John Watts as a director. John Watts is a guy who had done a schlocky horror film before this, a movie called Clown, that he basically got greenlit off the trailer, which he said was directed by Eli Roth. And then Eli Roth called him and said, "Hey, do you want to actually make this movie?" Which is kind of a weird success story.
That's a strange success story.
Yeah, it's a strange success story. Then he made, a sleeper indie hit, Cop Car, which I haven't seen, but a very good friend of mine, Gavin McGibbon, who also hosts another podcast, did say, recommended me to watch it. And he said, the reason he's excited for Spider-Man now is that he felt like this was a director who knew and understood story, and that's the kind of person you should give a franchise film. And having watched this film, I kind of agree with him. Again, Bob, you and I kind of talked briefly at the beginning about of like the pressure with which the studio is trying to churn this out in order to make a profit. So the artists who come in, the screenwriter, the director, are really at the behest of a machine that wants to simply print money. And whether you can do something interesting within that framework is a challenge. And now I'm not suggesting that John Watts has done something extraordinarily interesting with this. I think, as odd as it would, I think if the film was the Miles Morales story, I think that would be pushing it further than I think we might be comfortable with. And I think that would be interesting and exciting, and that would be a bold step. But even if it's not, I think John Watts as a director proves that he can work within that machinery very efficiently. And I have to say, for me personally, more convincingly than say someone, than Patty Jenkins did on Wonder Woman. I was not as taken by that film. Now, I don't think this film is as ambitious as Wonder Woman, but I think this is more successful in what it's trying to do in its own terms.
Okay.
I can't go there, but I understand how you get there.
Right.
That's fair. So here's the thing. This is, I feel like I've been heaping praise on this. I want to talk about one other moment in the film near the very end that I didn't particularly, it's one of those like, it's like eating too much ice cream. When like
brain freeze,
brain freeze, or just your stomach turns. You're like, yeah, I can keep eating this because it's delicious, even though your stomach is hurting. You're like, why am I doing this? And the moment I'm talking about is when finally everything's wrapped up and Peter defeats Toombs and delivers him to the cops, and Tony Stark's like, I knew you could do it, kid. And then there's this moment at Avengers headquarters where Tony's like, yeah, now we're gonna make you a full-fledged member of the Avengers, and I got 50 press people back here, and here's your brand new suit. And then he shows him the suit and it's cool and he almost does it. Then Peter decides that, oh no, it's just exactly, I want to stick with my regular life as what I liked all along and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, was this a test? And Tony's like, yeah, it was a test. And he leaves. And then it turns out, due to a funny little reveal, that Pepper Potts is back in Tony's life, that there actually were reporters and this whole thing was real. That, to me, that was a moment where it just didn't feel natural in the world that the movie had built. It didn't feel natural to the character that Tony Stark kind of has been set up to be. And it felt like a move, like it felt super corporate even from the Sony side, because they need Spider-Man to be important enough that the Avengers would want him, but he needs to be on his own.
Yeah.
Like, and it just felt, I don't know, that was the most dishonest part of the movie to me. How did you guys feel about that?
I agree that it's forced. I knew it was coming because, like, as soon as the arc of the movie sets in within the first 5 minutes of, okay, this is a stay-in-school kid movie where joining the Avengers is standing in for a lucrative NBA contract.
Yes.
Is, like, once that's there, I'm like, oh, okay, so the end of the movie is they offer him to be in the Avengers, and he says, no, actually, I've learned that I want to stay here and help, my people, and, it sets up this whole, kind of equally forced dynamic where, Peter, who seems to be poor. We don't really know what their situation is, but they don't seem to have a ton of money. So that he is I'm not sure. Do they say what Aunt May does for a living?
I think she's just professionally hot in this universe.
Okay. Yeah.
People just fawn over her because it's Marissa Tomei.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're leaning on the idea that, Peter is nominally working class because he's, basically because he lives in an apartment block in Queens. That's kind of the angle there. And therefore that gives him some kind of camaraderie with the Vulture so that we can lean on this very sort of forced blue collar working class hero bullshit.
Right.
Because, Pete, guys like us, the corporate guys, they don't understand us, which is it works because he's full of shit. But also it feels like the movie wants me to be more sympathetic to the Vulture than I really feel like I should be.
Right. Because even if you get screwed over by a corporate overlord, you're still a dick if you start murdering people with alien weapons.
Yeah, also there were, are we to believe that was the only construction project in Manhattan?
Right. Well, it was,
there was nothing, there was no other like he's basically a scrap metal dealer, right?
Yeah.
Is what we're leaning towards here. I'm pretty sure there's other stuff in New York that needed to be taken apart, but whatever.
But Bob, he bought trucks. He bought 6 trucks.
Yeah, I know, and he's employing a bunch of other minor references to other Spider-Man villains. So fine, whatever. It like everything else in this movie, it's like fine, good. I see what you're doing. A for effort, good enough. He has the wings, so I won't complain too much. But the ending thing with the Avengers thing is a little forced because it feels like that should be like the Iron Man tone and the Spider-Man tone are kind of like crashing up against each other here. Yeah. Where Peter's ending there is very earnest and oh yeah, okay, he's made the correct decision. And were Sam Raimi still making these series, that's when the slow strings part of the Elfman score would come back and he'd get a little monologue and someone would non-solemnly to him and it would be cheesy, but you'd remember it 10 minutes later. Whereas here, we get our, okay, yeah, good, attaboy, Peter, good job. And then instead of immediately following, the star of our movie home, we get a surprise cameo from, hey guys, Gwyneth Paltrow's back. Holy crap, we thought she was out of the series, but no, she's back. And they're gonna, and Jon Favreau's there, and we're saying, hey, sorry for fucking up Iron Man 2 on you, John. Here, you can come back in the movie and hand him a ring so that the Romans are it's fine, but it's the most forced of all of the reference stuff in there, which otherwise I was genuinely surprised that the Marvel stuff was not more obtrusive. I kept waiting for the Vulture to have an Infinity Stone or some or some dumb forced bullshit that's there to remind everyone. No. Iron Man shows up when it's logical for him to show up. Downey is actually acting in all of his other scenes. Like when he's doing the I'm very disappointed in you thing. He's not phoning it in at that point. I like I really like the meta gimmick of having him literally phone in a performance earlier and then making the idea that no, he's actually here right on set. This is the real shit now.
Yeah.
As a way to drop the hammer on the audience and let them know, no, this is where this gets real. This is not a joke anymore. That was whoever wrote that in, baller.
Yeah.
Right.
Very well done.
Agreed.
But, the ending of it it's one extra little joke too far. It's the only point where it really does. The Spider-Man movie ends, and instead of us following Spider-Man to the next scene, we stop for a brief prequel to Infinity War. And it's
Right.
the only place where that's a little bit of a problem.
And I think piggybacking off that, I agree with you that that this moment is the most cynical tie-in of this whole exercise. The curious thing for me, and I think the reason why it worked, was I actually was kind of sold by Michael Keaton's The Vulture and his kind of blue collar, as you guys call it, blue collar bullshit, because his entire argument is that Tony Stark continues to profit off his own chaos, and I something about that did ring true, and what I would have hoped is that Peter Parker's rejection of Tony Stark, of joining the Avengers at the end, was an acceptance of the Vulture's point of view there, that in order to create our own destiny, we have to take things into our own hands. And so if, like that line, if you, what was the line? If you need the suit, then you don't need the suit, or what did he say?
If you need the suit, then you don't deserve to have it.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
If the result of that line had been him realizing that he needs to go and make his own suit, or I think that would have been a more satisfying ending to this as a story, whereas instead what we get is a closer tie-in to the Avengers sequel, the Avengers Infinity Wars. But again, I don't, because Michael Keaton kind of works this well, and I think the story works, as it's required to work. It doesn't throw me out of the movie. It doesn't make me go, this is really not working. It kind of all. It's more like, the whole film just kind of just meshes together well enough, as you're saying. It's all there. It all comes together. Nothing about this is bad. And I think maybe the cynical part is, if that's our barometer for what's good, that it's not bad, then maybe we have been bombarded enough by the machine of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has been my argument. And the reason why I feel this way about this is that there are other interesting movies around right now that do tend to get drowned out by the conversation around what these franchises are doing. And frankly, as we've kind of discussed, they're not doing anything particularly interesting other than creating movies that connect to each other. And so, but it all meshes together and it all kind of works.
I mean, I agree with that on this film, Spider-Man: Homecoming. Obviously, Shahir, I don't agree with that as a whole on the MCU. But
we're all allowed to be wrong about something.
I haven't found that time for me yet. One day I'll get there, Bob. It will happen. But guys, all right, we've been talking about this for about an hour. We should wrap it up. Final thoughts. We're going to give it to you, Bob, at the end. So Shahir, just real quick sentence. You basically sort of did it. But if you had one thing, should people see this?
I think it is a good time in the movies, and I think the thing about it was that there was in our screening, Matt and I went and saw this together. There was a little kid in front of us who was far too young to be in this theater. He was probably like
True.
4 or 5 or something, like maybe 6 or 7. I don't know, couldn't tell. But the thing is, I wanted that kid to enjoy this movie on a level where he would run out of the theater and try to jump out of a fence or something like that. Parents, I'm telling
Wasn't
you,
it fall off a fence?
Fall off a fence or something like that. Do the flip, really get into the character, really feel energized by it. And I feel like superhero films should work at that visceral level to our childlike brains, where we should engage with them at a level where we walk out of them wanting to make the world a better place and wanting to do good and wanting to do amazing things. And I hoped that this child in front of us kind of got that experience from it. And I think the movie works well enough to do that. As I've said before, my criticisms are that it feels oddly unambitious for a large tentpole action movie, and we've said this before, making these kinds of things is incredibly difficult. So for me to say it's unambitious is talking about it on a narrative level. You know, it's unambitious on a narrative level, but it all works, and I think it's held together by a great performance from Tom Holland, who gives me a real Michael Keaton kind of vibe. I'm sorry, Michael J. Fox kind of vibe.
I was gonna say, huh?
Yeah, no, a Michael J. Fox kind of vibe, where he's doing this sort of G whiz kind of performance. It's really big, but it all really works, and really really efficient directorial choices by John Watts, and it makes me want to go back and watch Cop Car and Clown and just see the things, you know, like as we talked about Peter Jackson earlier, the things that led John Watts to be at the helm of such a tentpole film, but also the hope that at some point he will step away from this and make interesting films on their own terms.
Fair enough. I mean, obviously, I think people should see it. I also would send certain people that I know in with a grain of salt. More super critical people, or people that don't enjoy these kind of movies in general. But it hit me in my feels. And again, I do have to say that the strengths of this movie do lie in the high school parts, and the Spider-Man parts, and the MCU parts are just sort of the icing on the cake. And sometimes the cake is all icing and it gets a little bit sour. But overall, I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Sony totally doesn't mess up its own Spider-Verse. I think I'm just really looking to the future.
We're hoping that Life prequel turns out to be the Venom prequel.
Yeah, we really wanted the film Life to be the Venom prequel.
Yeah, that was a strange rumor.
Yeah, I was like, all right, let's go. Anyway, Bob, final thoughts.
I don't know if I should say that, like, you know, everyone should see this, but the thing is, everyone's gonna see this anyway. And, you know, there's nothing like super wrong with it. You know, it's a perfectly serviceable, small, minor movie. If not for the fact that it's based on, a 70-year-old media franchise and now connected to this big Marvel hullabaloo, it would probably be a one and done, quickly forgotten movie that people would think about 5 years from now and go, oh yeah, hey, that one about the kid with the spider bite, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. And I think that the only way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe whole big thing is both going to survive on its own terms and also not become a black hole from which every other movie genre cannot escape is for us to get to a cultural point where it's okay that not every one of these matters. You know, that they can string together this actually unimportant meta story about magic rocks and the people who do or do not have them. And just because that gives you the illusion of, you know, a bunch of stuff that you absolutely need to see, that you really can just, you know, see it eventually and just let it live in the big cultural zeitgeist and not necessarily build your entire movie-going life around it, because otherwise this is going to burn itself out.
Yeah.
But if the eventual future, once we're done killing Thanos or whatever is the point of Infinity War, if this is going to be what a lot of this eventually looks like, is a bunch of little movies that come out, they're kind of connected to each other, but if you don't give a shit, you don't need to, it is probably the way that this sustains. And, in that respect, I think it's it's a decent little movie. And I'm sure I'm going to get sick of talking about it because there's just nothing in it that's worth spending, you know, the years that we're going to spend talking about this on it. I hope that the next one, by which I mean the next Spider-Man, not the Infinity War, I hope the next one of these looks at this and says, okay, we've got good characters, we've got our high school stuff, that all works, you know, the foundation is here. Now that we've established that we can do light and airy fun with this, what's the other shoe? You know, now that we've done the villain who doesn't really matter, we've gone through a relationship story that's not really quite there. You know, what does this look like when it has to get big and serious? When we get what's the Empire Strikes Back moment for this franchise? That is what I want to find out.
Bob, do you, just one quick question off that. Do you think it's behooves us as reviewers and as an audience to challenge our expectations of what we think these movies should do in order to push that forward? So, I mean, it's curious because you said that, like if we accept that the cultural conversation is about just accepting that these films are little and inconsequential, do you think, I kind of backed myself into a corner a little earlier when I said that, the fact that the film is okay is the barometer of what requires it to be good. Do you think we need to be a little bit more aggressive about that? Or do we, as an audience, do we need to say, hey, you know what? We shouldn't shell out as much money for these kinds of movies, and we should be shelling out things for interesting, challenging movies that transform the way we understand cinema and life in general, or is it okay just to kind of, it's a fun movie to see on a Friday night?
I don't think it needs to be an either or.
Right.
I think that's assuming for a moment, that not everyone is in the kind of financial straits where they can only see one movie a year.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming for a moment that you get to watch more than one movie every 6 months or so, I don't think it needs to be an either or choice. Whether or not you go to see Spider-Man Homecoming has no effect at all as to whether or not Terrence Malick gets to make another movie.
Right.
What matters is, going support. It is more important to support the interesting stuff than to not support the studio stuff, because that one is going to get made no matter what. You're going to, if you really care about advancing the cause of cinematic art with your ticket buying, you're going to do more going to see small films than you will not going to see big films. Your protest vote is almost dumber here than it is in an actual election.
Right. I could not agree more, sir.
I tried.
Well, guys, this has been the only podcast about Spider-Man Homecoming. Bob, when you are not doing everything that a spider can, where can folks find you across this worldwide interweb?
Right now, the majority of my content independently is posted to my YouTube channel. That's under Movie Bob. You can find the shows are called Really That Good, In Bob We Trust, Game Overthinker. Those are them. You can also find my blog, my personal site rather, that kind of collects the hub of everything. That's moviebobcentral.com. Please bookmark that and go, because that makes things good for everything. MovieBob1 is the Patreon. That's paying for me to do a lot of this stuff. And I am also you can find my weekly paid professional gig at geek.com. That's every week, usually once, sometimes twice a week, with reviews of new release films. Please check that out. And I'm also a news writer for screenrant.com, and check that out there, because I have some interesting, hopefully interesting long form articles posted there, which you may find to your enjoyment as well. And please follow me on Twitter at @the_moviebob. Because sometimes I get off on a real tear, and you'll want to be there for that, because I sometimes have to delete it right afterwards.
They are always wonderful, and I every time I see you come across my Twitter feed, I'm like, oh yes, I will enjoy this. Yes, and please, again, I just want to reiterate one more time to everyone: go to Patreon, look up Movie Bob. Donate, I think, what is it, $1? You will be getting so much content for so little money.
And entirely worth your time. It's worth voting with your dollar.
Yes, vote with your dollar there, people. There's a vote.
Thank you so much.
Yes, no, of course. And thank you for being on the show. And Shahir, of course, when you're not debating the validity of the MCU with me, where can people find you?
I feel like that's pretty much all I do at this point.
It is. Okay, so nowhere else.
If you want to see that more often, you can go to my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Want to put in a plug for the music video we launched last week, Pyramids, Wind at My Back, which is not available on a single site right now. It's still on Vimeo, so you have to post it. So we will post it again on the Facebook page as a link after the show comes out, if you want to check it out.
It's very good. It's very cool. It's very colorful.
Yes, and Robot music video.
Is it coming?
It is coming.
Oh my God.
It has a release date, and so Robot music video will be coming soon. I'll keep you posted about that.
Shahir is a director, and he makes music videos a bunch. He makes great ones, but the one I'm really excited about, he made forever ago, and I guess it's robots that play good, like real music. Like
Nice.
it's going to be amazing, and I'm very psyched for that. And everybody, you can find me at MatthewKrol.com, MatthewKrol.com for my life and work. Skeletor, the number 4 PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, please come to iTunes, leave us stars. We like them.
Write us in for your own movie requests, or hit us up on your thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming, but on Twitter at OnlyMoviePod, or email us at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com.
And we will get to all of your emails you sent us in next week. We know this one went a little long, so we will do that. We got a bunch of good ones from a bunch of different topics, both agreeing and disagreeing with all of us. Bob, thank you one more time. It's been great having you on.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Excellent. And we will see you guys next week.
Yes, hopefully for some Netflix fueled fun with Super Pigs.
Yes.
Bye.
Thwip. And post-credit scene. No, that's it. We're done.